Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, Ranger Suarez has back stiffness. How concerned should Philadelphia Phillies fans be?
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio doing sports talk here in Philadelphia for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and this is my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're checking us out on the YouTube, watching today's episode as well as listening, hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted, and it also really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Check out our friends over at FanDuel. It's a great time to do that because the tournament is starting today, and the Phillies are experiencing some March madness of their own. But their madness is not craziness. It's more anger concerned around Ranger Suarez with back stiffness. So we're going to lead off with that. I'm going to talk to you about how big of a deal this could be, because it could be a big deal. We're also going to talk about Garrett Stubbs and what the Phillies did with him today. And we're going to get into our off-the-poll answers from yesterday's question. But let's start with the big news. They kind of broke at the end of recording yesterday, and I haven't had a chance to talk about it on here till right now. I did talk a little bit on air on the radio about it today. Ranger Suarez has back stiffness. This is something that we heard about last year as well that caused him to miss some time. Now, the Phillies have said they don't think it's as serious as what he dealt with in season last year. So that would seem to point in a positive direction, obviously. But this is majorly concerning, because the reason why Ranger Suarez is not already on a long-term deal with the Philadelphia Phillies is because of stuff like this. It's not his ability to throw the baseball. It's not his focus and clutchness when the moment is the biggest. He has been talented. He has been reliable when he's available. He has been ice cold, and in a good way, in the biggest moments that he's been asked to pitch for the Philadelphia Phillies. But my goodness, are there just too many times that this guy is not available for them? Too many issues. Now, I don't know if this is conditioning that leads to this. I don't know if it's him just not being lucky. Injuries can sometimes be bad luck. Injuries can also sometimes be a lack of preparation. And we've seen a lot of this coming out of spring training from Ranger Suarez. We saw it later on in the season last year, but remember, sickness, visa issue, other injuries, stuff like that have happened in spring trainings prior. And now, with under a week till opening day, you lose a very important starter for some period of time. And this makes things really complicated when it comes to the Phillies pitching situation. Anyone who's looking at this and says, well, you have Andrew Painter for a reason. Andrew Painter is not coming up until midsummer, June or July. That is when you're going to be hearing the first from Andrew Painter at the major league level. So they're not just going to put him in the opening day rotation. That's not realistic. The Phillies are not willing to do it. They've said that many times, even before this injury. So that's not a new strategy. That is the standing strategy. There is one guy that can be moved into the Philadelphia Phillies rotation, it seems, and that guy would be Taijuan Walker. And that sucks, because Taijuan Walker is not a very good starting pitcher. He's proven that in his time here in Philadelphia. He hasn't gotten the job done. And now the rotation that was going to be Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo is now Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Luzardo, Walker. And it feels like an every fifth day is a loss type of situation to start the season with. And when you're competing in the toughest division in baseball, that is not going to get the job done. It's not. You can't give away games. And starting Taijuan Walker is giving away games. Now, we had someone on the radio say the Phillies choosing to keep Taijuan Walker and having him in the starting rotation is a misstep by them. The Phillies aren't choosing to do this. They do not want Taijuan Walker to start. They barely want him on the team at all. And he's being forced into this because, well, one, Matt Strahm got hurt, so you're looking at a bullpen spot potentially available for opening day. And now Ranger Suarez has back stiffness, looking at a rotation spot open for the start of the season. And Taijuan Walker has just kind of lucked his way into being important. There's that meme that goes around like, I accidentally became important at work and it's ruining my life. That's Taijuan Walker for the 2025 Phillies, and the season hasn't even started yet. Now, hopefully, with this being less dangerous than what he had, according to the Phillies, during last season, Ranger Suarez can be back in a couple of weeks, maybe, I guess would be the time frame. So you should only need a couple of starts out of Taijuan Walker. If you have to get 2 starts out of Taijuan Walker, okay, fine. We can live with that. And this first one of the year is going to come against the Colorado Rockies. It's a winnable game. But if he has to make another start, it's going to be against the Braves or the Dodgers. Like, that's not ideal for the Philadelphia Phillies to go in against those caliber of opponents. So how worried should Phillies fans be about this? Very. Because Ranger Suarez has not shown in past years that he has minor injuries and immediately comes back. What he's shown is he has an injury, and it turns into a nagging thing that bothers him for the rest of the year, and he's got to fight tooth and nail to win the fan base back over. And you know what? He did that last year in the postseason with his start against the Mets in the final game of that series. He was really, really good. Problem is, he wasn't good enough to win, and that's not fault of him. That's more fault of the offense. And you went through 2 months before that where we had to worry about him, and that's part of the reason the Phillies went on their slide. So, I mean, if there's a rotation in baseball that can afford to lose pitchers, the Phillies are one of them. It's basically them and the Dodgers that have like that high level rotation. I guess the Mariners have that as well. The Braves like to believe they have it. I'm not buying it quite as much with them, but this isn't DEFCON 1 for the Philadelphia Phillies, which is the worst one if you're not familiar with the DEFCON scale. But it's not good news, because when I hear back stiffness, getting ready to head into the season, 2 things are going to happen. One, the Phillies are going to be, just like they are with Matt Strom's injury, abundantly cautious with how they handle Ranger Suarez's return to pitching. They're not just going to throw him out there the second he's ready. They're going to take time. You may see a minor league rehab stint, since the season will begin, it seems, when Ranger Suarez is starting to work his way back. It could take a little bit more time than it would normally if we were in season. But 2, you're starting the season behind the 8 ball, which means for every 2 weeks, Ranger Suarez is going to be behind. That's going to be time for him to make up on other pitchers, other hitters, everybody in the game, or everybody who's been healthy in the game. Now, the Phillies aren't the only team with injury questions coming into the season. This happens around baseball, which is why the number one thing in spring training is to deliver a healthy team to opening day. The Phillies have unfortunately not done that in totality, though they do have most of their players healthy and ready to go. What I worry about is, how is Ranger Suarez, if he missed, let's say he misses 2 weeks, he misses 4 series worth of games. You think he's just going to come in and pitch the rest of the year without having any issues with that back or any issues with anything else? Like, when you hurt a muscle, when you hurt something, like I had UCL issues when I pitched in college. And then later on in my collegiate career, I had triceps tendon issues in the same arm. They're on the opposite side of the arm from each other because I was throwing in a different way to kind of make up for the weakness of the UCL. With the triceps tendon, I ended up hurting the other one as well. So my point in saying that is, the back injury may be okay, but is he throwing a certain way because he's worried about his back that then hurts the shoulder? Or like, does it hurt the arm? Like, what exactly can you have faith in with Ranger Suarez's lack of durability already, now that he's got another issue to deal with? This is a major problem. And Taijuan Walker is not going to be able to get the job done as a long-term starter for this team. I firmly believe that. Ranger Suarez is probably not going to be available consistently this year. That's my guess based on this. That might sound like an overreaction. I don't know the last time you guys hurt your back, but it's not really something that a lot of pitching for a baseball team at the major league level is going to fix, right? Rest is all that's going to fix it. And then when you come back, you could easily exacerbate that injury again. So you could see already the struggle of keeping the rotation healthy for the Philadelphia Phillies. And that was a big question, because if they're healthy, they're, for my money, the best rotation in baseball. But the second Taijuan Walker goes in there, there are a couple of rotations that I would probably take over the Philadelphia Phillies, because I think you're giving away a win every 5th day as long as he's in the rotation. Remember what I said? Taijuan Walker, we got to come to terms with him being on this opening day roster, if you've heard me say that, because it's a certainty he's going to be. That was in a relief pitcher role that I hoped we weren't going to have to use. This is totally different. you can lose your mind over this one, Phillies fans, because I can't stand to see another Taijuan Walker start at the major league level. And that's what it looks like we're in for to start the season. So a major damper for the Phillies, an explanation of why Ranger Suarez has not gotten a long-term extension from the Philadelphia Phillies that you've seen guys like Nola, Wheeler, and Sanchez get. And, man, I'm not saying like bad vibes about the Phillies season yet, because there's other great teams that have injury questions. The Braves have a bunch of them. The Mets have a bunch of them. The Dodgers will have them eventually because it's baseball. It's a marathon. But so the Phillies aren't an anomaly in this circumstance, but it would have been great to be an anomaly in the positive to get everyone to opening day healthy. And Ranger Suarez is not the guy you want. If it happened to Nola, and it's like, oh, this guy's been durable forever, like he'll come back and probably still be fine, you can believe in that. Ranger, I don't like the idea of Ranger starting a contract year for him behind the 8 ball, where he's going to want to try and force himself to get out there to earn the big paycheck, maybe push himself a little too much. There are a lot of interesting factors that are going to play off of this injury report throughout the season. This is not just a 2-week problem. This is a 4 or 5 month problem that the Phillies are going to have to manage, even if it's more minor compared to last year's injury. So not good news for the Philadelphia Phillies. This is the first major concern of the season that I've had with the Phillies from anything that came out of spring training. So everyone who's worried about the lineup and who's batting leadoff and who's playing where in the field and all of this stuff, these are what the real problems of spring training look like. A very talented pitcher down with back stiffness. We'll see when he will be available for the Philadelphia Phillies and what he will look like when he is available for the Phillies. Coming up next, the Phils made a roster move with Garrett Stubbs, and obviously you know what that means. He was sent down to the minor leagues today. Not a surprise if you've been listening to us on Locked On Phillies. I've been telling you this is coming for a while, but what exactly does it mean that they made that move? Now that it's concrete, we could talk about what we're expecting from Rafael Marchan. What does the backup catcher position look like in 2025 for the Phillies? We will discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about our friends over at Upwork here. Some new friends. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, marketing, all that great stuff that you need to grow your business. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Maybe you need help with a marketing campaign. Well, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. They got a fast and easy hiring help, and cost-effective growth is important too. So instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers so you don't have to commit all that money to someone who you might just need for one job. It's a great, great company that gives great work to businesses that need it. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork, UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So if you need that help in the hiring game, go ahead and check out our friends over at Upwork. And you know what time it is, folks. March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. As you're watching this episode, March Madness is already tipped off. So what are you waiting for? Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets at the end of it all. I like the Blue Devils. Take a look at them. And I've also got my eye on Florida. I think they are the hottest team in college basketball. I really like what they're doing. If you're looking for an underdog, Drake. Yeah, an 11 seed. Maybe this is their year for a Cinderella run. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app is simple to use. When I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So we got some news that I've been expecting, and I've been preaching to you here on Locked On Phillies for what feels like months now. The catcher position for the Philadelphia Phillies backup-wise, was always going to be Rafael Marchan. Anyone who sees the news today about Garrett Stubbs being sent down and says, let me go check out Locked On Phillies for what Connor has to say, because I'm surprised that they actually did it, that they actually moved off of Garrett Stubbs, who's been their backup catcher for 3 seasons. Here's why. I'll explain it again. Rafael Marchan did not have any minor league options, which means if he is not on your opening day roster, he would have to clear waivers to get to the minor leagues. In order to clear waivers, all 29 other teams would have to pass on him, and that was not going to happen. He's too talented of a player to get clear through waivers. So basically, if you wanted Garrett Stubbs on the team, you would have had to let Rafael Marchan not just sit in the minors, no, walk to a different organization. Garrett Stubbs, on the other hand, had a minor league option. He could be sent down without having to clear waivers. So you make the logistical choice. Now, was this choice all logistics? I don't believe so. I think that's the main driver. If they both had options, it would be a very tight competition for who the backup catcher is. And the Phillies still might have made this decision. And the reason why, outside of the options conversation, that they would have made this decision is because they need to change things up. Dave Dombrowski has told you that. Rob Thompson has told you that. John Middleton has told you that. The brass of the Phillies need to see changes. There's only so much they can do with the roster as far as signing new talent, giving out more paychecks. They have a lot of positions locked down. This was one of the few spots that was a question mark. And to me, it was more of an exclamation point. Yeah, Rafael Marchan's the backup catcher. I've been telling you this. And part of the reason was what we just talked about with the options, but part of it as well is Rafael Marchan is the much more polished offensive player. Now, I think Garrett Stubbs' defense is underrated. I think he did a really nice job of managing the rotation when he had his chances to fill in for JT Realmuto. He had a really nice job of catching Aaron Nola the past couple seasons. And he doesn't get enough credit for that. I understand why he doesn't get enough credit for that, because he looks like he's 140 pounds soaking wet and he doesn't hit the ball. And you say, oh, why is this guy on the team? Is it just because he's a funny guy that the locker room likes? Listen, don't diminish the idea of keeping a good locker room, but that also isn't the reason he was on the team. Like, he was a capable backup catcher defensively. He just never hit at the major league level. He may still. I don't think this is the last we hear from Garrett Stubbs, but more on that in a second. Rafael Marchan is the more polished offensive player, and in a year where JT Realmuto is going to have to take more time off than he has in past seasons because he's aging and the Phillies want to keep him healthy and fresh for the time of year that matters most, which is September, October, you've got to give him more rest. And that means more opportunity for the backup catcher, and that means you can't have a guy batting 110 as the backup catcher who's going to play 40 games. That would be my mark for where I want to see Rafael Marchan at. If he's there with the Phillies the whole season, barring injury, of course, we always knock on wood for that. As you can see with the Ranger Suarez thing, sometimes knock on wood helps, sometimes it hurts. But I think if Rafael Marchan is available all year, 40 games would be good. 120 out of JT, 40 out of Marchan. That could be, I don't know. It's not going to be Sundays always, but it could be like one of those Sunday quote-unquote give-up lineups. It could be a specific pitcher. Now, I don't think Marchan gets paired with a specific pitcher because I don't think he has the rapport with guys in the rotation yet like that. I don't know. Maybe he does, but I have not heard anything to suggest he has a favorite guy to catch or there's a pitcher that loves throwing to Rafael Marchan. Not that they don't like the guy, but Stubbs and Nola had that relationship. I don't know if Marchan, who has not been the true backup catcher on this team, except when JT Realmuto went down last year, I don't know if he's developed that relationship with any of the guys at the major league level. Maybe he has, and we'll see him catch a specific guy, but I see it more likely that JT is going to want to try to be out there as much as possible, and when the Phillies force him to take a day, it will be Marchan, regardless of who is pitching. Now, what this also does is it gives the Phillies another viable bench bat. You couldn't pinch hit Garrett Stubbs for really anybody. Like, that was not his role. Could you pinch hit Rafael Marchan for guys? I suppose so. I mean, you'll have to see how he does again in an extended sample size at the major league level this year, but there could come a point where you get more offensively out of that position as a sum of the parts than you did with Garrett Stubbs last year, right? Like, not only can Marchan hit when he's playing catcher, maybe he can hit as a pinch hitter. And the Phillies have not really had anybody who's been a great pinch hitter for them over the past couple seasons. Sneaky bad part of their game is that they haven't had great pinch hit numbers. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I do think there was some of the conversation about sending Stubbs down that was, we want to try Marchan because we think he has more upside. Most of it was the logistics part of it. Defensively, you may take a step back slightly. Offensively, you should take a jump forward, but how much so? And is it enough to offset the days that JT is going to need off? It will be very interesting. The reason I say you have not seen the last of Garrett Stubbs, I don't think, is because someone's going to get hurt, right? That's just reality. Marchan has had injury issues in his career. It's what's really derailed his development as a prospect. JT Realmuto is aging, and we saw him have a major injury last year that required surgery in the middle of the season. If one of those guys goes down, Garrett Stubbs is going to be the guy they call up, like undoubtedly. So we could see him if Marchan goes down. We could see him if JT goes down. And the chances that JT and Marchan are totally healthy through the entire season, I would say are low. And that's okay. That happens to catchers around baseball all the time. It's the most wear and tear position on the diamond. So you're going to probably see Stubbs at some point this year, like more likely than not. Anyone who's having a victory lap because they hated Garrett Stubbs and they're like, finally, this guy's off my team, he's going to be back. And it's actually good that you have a guy like Garrett Stubbs in the minors because he's going to not only help the AAA pitchers that you could use in depth in the bullpen and rotation, but he's a guy that you can lean on if you have to go to a call-up to say, okay, well, we know this guy, who he is at the major league level. We know he knows our pitchers. He's a better depth option than most people have at AAA. So this is the move the Phillies had to make. I don't think it's a bad move. I think it could work out very much for the positive. I'm not so much ragging on Garrett Stubbs as I am lauding Marchan for getting this opportunity, and we will see how it plays out. But I think the Phillies did what needed to be done, and credit to them for not just putting locker room above all else, which they haven't done at any point. That's a misnomer that Garrett Stubbs is just on the team because he's a fun guy to hang out with. No, he has some upside defensively, but they made the change this year. A lot of fans will be happy about that. I'm not surprised. And I hope that Marchan plays up to the level that the Phillies believe he can. Coming up as we wrap up today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about our off-the-poll responses. Which new Philly is in for the best debut year? We got 4 candidates for it. I'll tell you who the fans voted for as we wrap up today's episode.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, off the poll question for this week's episode is an interesting one. I'm very curious to where the fan base is on this. The question was based on something that Jason Stark said to me on Tuesday when I talked to him in an interview on 97.5 The Fanatic alongside my guy Ricky Batalico. And Jason Stark brought up concerns from a rival executive. I say rival as in another team, not necessarily like the NL East or the National League, but a rival executive had questions about guys like Jordan Romano and Max Kepler and Jesus Luzardo and why their previous teams had moved on from them. It seems like they were wary of something on all 3 of those players. Now, if you know Twitter polls, you know that you get 4 options. And there are really 4 new players joining the Philadelphia Phillies in notable roles from this offseason. So I figured, why not throw Joe Ross in there as well? And our question was, which new Philly do you think is in for the best debut season in Philly? Is it Jordan Romano, Max Kepler, Joe Ross, or Jesus Luzardo? Now, obviously, none of those guys have the same role on the team. 2 relievers, different types, a left fielder, and a starting pitcher. So it's hard to evaluate out. There's a lot of things that go into this conversation. But for me, I would say that I think the best season is going to come from Jordan Romano. And I know Jesus Luzardo in the starting rotation has been a guy I've talked about a lot. I think he's going to be great. I think Jordan Romano is going to be very, very important in the bullpen. Part of this is opportunity. Luzardo's the 5th starter, right? He is, well, now he's the 4th starter because Taijuan Walker's your 5th starter. That's going to take some time to get used to. But he is a guy that the pressure is not really on him. The pressure's on Wheeler and Nola and Sanchez, and that ramps up now that Ranger Suarez goes down to start the year with back stiffness, which we talked about earlier. But you're looking at a situation where Luzardo is asked to be the 4th, or when Ranger's healthy, 5th starter. When Andrew Painter comes up, who knows where everyone's going to be as far as the rotation is concerned. Romano's going to be the closer of this team breaking camp. And that's a really important role in the bullpen. And that's going to be why I think he has the better opportunity to have a better year and cashes in on that. We've heard people who saw him in his time in Toronto say he's been a team leader. He was great in their locker room, very likable guy. He's a guy that takes care of his business, is reliable when he's healthy. Like, he'll go out there and he'll give you the performance you expect out of a high-level closer at the major league level. So I like the chances there for the upside with Jordan Romano. But what do the fans like? Who did they vote for? Coming in last place in this poll with just 3% of the vote is the guy I threw in at the end, Joe Ross. Now, did it to make it even. I understand he's not one of the higher profile free agent signings in a low profile year for the Philadelphia Phillies. Ross could be important in the swing starter role because, remember, he started in Milwaukee at points, but he was out of the bullpen as well. The Phillies are starting with him in the bullpen. Now, the Taijuan Walker assumption that he's going to be the guy seems to make sense because he's more of a starter than Joe Ross is. But if Taijuan Walker struggles, you could see Joe Ross beginning the year as kind of that fifth starter in an emergency role. We have seen that 3 times in 3 seasons, really, with the Philadelphia Phillies, with Spencer Turnbull. And then prior to that, I mean, you saw Matt Strahm do it. I mean, you kind of saw Michael Lorenzen do it at points. Now, he was a trade deadline acquisition, but you have seen these guys come in at the start of the season and go out there, mainly Turnbull and Strahm, and say, okay, we need you to step in for an injured pitcher early. They start off the season well. They keep the Phillies alive, and they extend the chances for them to compete more than if you had a bad fifth starter. Could Joe Ross be that guy? Maybe. If Taijuan Walker falters early, I don't think the Phillies would be afraid to go to him. So maybe he is going to have a sneaky good year in a big spot early for the Phillies, but there's a long season, and he just doesn't quite have the role that's as important as these other players. In second to last place, and another minimal amount of the vote, 15% of responders to this poll picked Jordan Romano, who's my pick to have the best debut year in Philadelphia. I guess bullpen pitcher you don't look at as important, even though closer I think is very important, even if the modern game has forgotten the true closer as of late. I still love having a great closing pitcher. I think Jordan Romano has major upside in that category. I think he's going to have a really good year in a really big spot. I already kind of explained that to you before we got into the responses, but fan base not agreeing with me. And then we have a dead heat tie between the other couple options. Max Kepler and Jesus Luzardo both receiving 41% of the vote on this poll. What does that say? Well, one, it says that they're going to be the most FaceTime getting players of the 4 on this list. Max Kepler obviously is going to be playing left field. Jesus Luzardo is going to be one of your starters. You're going to see these guys a bunch. There's high expectations for them because they're names you probably knew pretty well before they came to the Philadelphia Phillies. Kepler maybe less because he was in the American League for his whole career, but Luzardo was in the division. So you knew who Jesus Luzardo was, and you know some of his great starts against the Phillies that have existed before he came to this team. So I like that people believe that. I'm surprised about Max Kepler being tied with Jesus Luzardo because Luzardo has been lauded as this great move by Dave Dombrowski, by me and by others, and by some in the fan base. He's a talented pitcher that makes this rotation really, really good. We like that move to get him from Miami in division trade. Those are more rare, and a lot of people have sounded to be high on Luzardo, including the fan base. All I've heard about Kepler from the fan base is, here comes another guy that just hits home runs. Here comes a guy, he's not all that great defensively. He's okay defensively. Here's a guy that was hurt last year, and his average isn't great career-wise, and he's a Twins cast-off, and the Twins weren't even that good with him. He had one great year home run-wise. What has he turned into? Is he healthy? All of these questions are the predominant sound on Max Kepler, where Jesus Luzardo, it's been positive. And now when we do this poll, to have them tied at 41%, maybe there is more faith in Max Kepler from the fan base than I give folks credit for based on what I'm hearing. Now, I only interact with the people I interact with. I don't talk to every single Phillies fan all the time. I'm not like Bruce Almighty, where he got the email, he got God's email, and there are just a billion things in the inbox of everybody's thoughts ever. That's not what Locked On Phillies is here, where I get everybody's commentary on the team. So maybe there's just this quiet sect of believers in Max Kepler that haven't been as vocal as the folks that are saying Dave Dombrowski didn't do enough this offseason. And maybe people still think Max Kepler is going to have a good year, but he's the best of a bad bunch. If you're saying, well, I voted for Kepler, but I still don't think they did enough. There's a lot of interesting factors that contribute to that. But the fact that you have 41% on Kepler and 41% on Luzardo means that at least for the two most important players on this list of four in our off the poll question, you have 82% of the fan base picking them to have good debut years in Philadelphia. That should be a good sign. That should make you feel good in a episode where we talked a lot about Ranger Suarez and why that should worry you. So, oh man, early drama with the Phillies already. It wouldn't be a sports season in Philadelphia if there wasn't something right off the bat that made us nervous. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. In tomorrow's episode, the Phillies have made an interesting call at center field. And I didn't even expect this, even though I'm high on the guy that they made the call on. So we will talk about Brandon Marsh, Johan Rojas, and the future of the center field position for 2025 in tomorrow's episode. So stay tuned for that. I want to thank you for checking out Locked On Phillies and making us your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with host Dominic Martino and Matt Dione. He's got great, well, they both have great stuff with baseball and fantasy baseball. So if your draft season is here, which pretty much all of us are, opening day in under a week, be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Phillies on YouTube and Locked On MLB Fantasy or Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Please make sure, once again, you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube here on Locked On Phillies. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.